being able to get the attention of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies and getting them involved and engaged in the ecosystem has been really a positive thing that I think a lot of our advocacy work that we've been doing for 8 years now is starting to pay off.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside.
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Jay Klaus, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Doggy Birthday Party himself, Eric Hornung.
Hank turned 1 year old. How come all my nicknames are always about Hank? Is there nothing else interesting about me?
My favorite thing about you is your dog.
Is that why you made the trip all the way down to Cincinnati to celebrate a canine's 1 year birthday?
I've never seen a dog's 1 year birthday party. I was curious about that. I was also in need of a bed, which you provided, so thank you. And I have to say, you and friend of the podcast, Colleen, were both very happy to see that after Hank went to the groomer, he still had his gnarly curly whisker. And I think you got to do something about that. I don't think it's a good look.
You don't like the curly whisker?
I don't think it's a good look.
Oh, you're gonna get in trouble with friend of the podcast, Colleen.
Why would you want the curly whisker?
I call it the Salvador doggy.
Salvador doggy. That's good. That's good. And the party was good too. It was a well done, very fun, very nice birthday party. Probably a better birthday party than I've had for myself. So kudos.
Colleen
or Cujo's.
Really that was pretty good. It would have been better if you would have knocked it out the first time.
You're right.
Yeah, we had a specialty drink. It was called Hank's Swiss Kiss. It was Goldschlager, which is from Switzerland, which is where Bernese mountain dogs are from, hence Bernese, apple cider, and some rum, and a few other things. Overall, a lot of fun. We had 35 plus people come through my less than 1,200 square feet apartment, so it was a bit crowded, but everyone had a good time, and then we went over to Blink.
And I know what you're thinking, dear listener. You're thinking, how irresponsible to have an alcohol-inspired birthday party for a 1 year old. But don't forget that Hank, as a dog, is actually 7.
Does that make it any better?
It was good. It was good. We had pizza, we had pastries, we had a good time.
You know what city's known for having a good time in my history, Jay?
What city's that, Eric?
Oh man, I have had some great times in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Milwaukee, old Milwaukee.
Old Milwaukee, known for alcohol. So, we have a segue there as well. I really could have pulled a couple things out of there. This is a rough segue.
It was a stretch. Have you seen the Will Ferrell Old Milwaukee commercials?
I have not.
Will Ferrell did a series of commercials for the Old Milwaukee beer brand, and they were not commissioned. They did not ask him to do that. He just decided he wanted to make commercials for Old Milwaukee, and they are great. All
right, so check out the Will Ferrell Old Milwaukee beer commercials. I'm guessing he yells in them. That seems to be a caricature he takes on.
I'm not going to ruin the surprise. Just search it on YouTube, Old Milwaukee. Today we're going to focus on new Milwaukee, current Milwaukee, with Matt Cordio, the founder and president of Skills Pipeline, but also one of the driving forces behind Startup Milwaukee. Matt came recommended to us, introduced to us by Grady Buchanan at Omni Valley, who has introduced us to several of our ecosystem builders that we talk to here on the podcast. And he said, if you need to talk about Milwaukee, Matt Cordio is the guy to go to.
We've talked a little bit about Milwaukee on the podcast, but only with Sherry Zhang, the founder and CEO of Geno Palette, and only very briefly since we focus mostly on her company. So it'll be fun to dive into a more holistic conversation around the community with someone who knows what's going on.
We got a little bit of a taste with Scott Resnick in Madison.
Okay, so we've had a couple tastes of Milwaukee, but we haven't had the full entree.
Got a little bit more of a taste with Joe Kurgis of Generator.
Couple tastes. We had some hors d'oeuvres and have not had the full entree. Metaphor still holds up, Jay.
Seems like I savored more of the taste of Milwaukee than you have.
Old Milwaukee.
We're excited to hear what Matt has to say and explain about Milwaukee to us. If you have thoughts as we go through this, you can tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm. We look forward to hearing from you, and we'll get into that interview right after this.
Jay, would you say you're more of a operator or an allocator?
Operator, for sure.
You're definitely an operator? Well, if you were going to hire someone to hire for you, would you want to hire an operator or an allocator?
Eric, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what the term allocator really means in this context.
All right, well, let's pretend it means capital allocator.
I would want to hire an operator.
All right, well, that's great because our friends over at Integrity Power Search are a team comprised of ex-operators of successful high-growth startups and tech companies, which allows them to be a true strategic partner. See, Integrity Power Search is the #1 full-stack, high-growth startup recruiting firm between the coasts. They partner with venture capitalists, private equity groups, and CEOs to build amazing teams for the world's most disruptive companies, like Upside, Jay. Since 2012, they've successfully executed 600 plus searches and are on track for 200 more in 2019. Their clients have successfully raised over $2.5 billion in venture funding, and that is still counting.
Sounds like they know how to operate a recruiting firm.
And they know how to identify great operators for your startup.
Smooth operators. So if you guys want to meet Integrity Power Search and learn what they can do for your high growth startup, go to upside.fm/integrity and get started. Matt, welcome to the show.
It is great to be here.
On Upside, we like to start with a background of the guest. So can you tell us about the history of Matt?
Sure. So I'll start with, I grew up in the Milwaukee area. Really, as a kid, I guess, was pretty entrepreneurial, had various little side businesses and whatnot, and realized I was going to probably go into entrepreneurship. Studied entrepreneurship at Marquette University in Milwaukee. Had the opportunity to start a tech company. The company was like a homeowner contractor matching service, not dissimilar to a company like Angie's List. They would be considered a competitor to what we were trying to do. That company didn't last very long. Learned a lot, though. One of those things that I learned was Milwaukee's tech startup ecosystem. This is back in 2011. No one was really talking about it. No one was bringing it together. And out of that experience, myself and some other entrepreneurs really started to think about how do we bring together the right stakeholders to build a startup ecosystem in our city. And that's where Startup Milwaukee came from. And also around the same time, I launched Skills Pipeline, my company, which does tech recruitment.
So I'm going to steal one of Jay's favorite questions, and I want you to take me back into this younger Matt who was very entrepreneurial. What was one of your favorite entrepreneurial ventures kind of growing up?
So one of my favorite startups as a kid was actually really a tangible product business. So I started a company that called Mattery Barn, stole the name from Pottery Barn maybe, and actually built like home goods. So you guys are really getting me to open up about that. But that was probably my favorite. Mattery Barn really launched me on my entrepreneurial career trajectory, which I am still on today.
And how did that kind of come to be? When did you say, I want to do home goods and sell these pieces of furniture? So
as a kid, often when I would fake sick or during the summers, I'd watch like TLC or Discovery Channel. Apparently I wasn't into cartoons. So, some of the different home shows inspired me to think, well, I could sell a line of furniture. And got me down that career path, I guess, temporary career path.
And what happened to Mattery Barn? Did you wind that down at some point?
Yeah, it winded down. I think I lost interest in manufacturing furniture, and sales waned as my family became less and less more and more disinterested in my furniture offerings.
All right, so you did the home goods store, you did Mattery Barn, you're experiencing entrepreneurship. At some point, you said you pulled stakeholders together to talk about the Milwaukee startup ecosystem. What year was that, and what existed at the time in Milwaukee?
Between Mattery Barn and Startup Milwaukee, had Cervique, my homeowner contractor matching service with a friend from college. And through that process, both of us were not technical. So we realized we need a technical co-founder to build a tech company, obviously. So we, as college students, really weren't aware of networking and how to do that. So we figured might as well start our own networking group, I guess. So as college students, we were kind of blind as to how you go about building a business networking group. And so we just started getting together with friends over beer. For those of you not familiar with Milwaukee, we're a beer town. It's part of our history, our entrepreneurial heritage. We have brands like Miller, Pabst, Schlitz, Blatz that came from Milwaukee and made Milwaukee really the economy what it is today in a certain respect. And so we just started gathering entrepreneurs over beer, talking about our challenges, what we need to grow our businesses, and figured we should come up with a name for that group. Startup Milwaukee seemed like a pretty simple name and a brand people could rally around. And just started hosting various networking events, pitch nights. We did a couple startup weekends, and the Startup Milwaukee movement has kind of continued to grow. Now, in our 8th year, we'll turn 8 in August.
How big were those initial kind of meetings and meetups?
Probably about 5 or so folks around a table, but quickly then we started, that was kind of more the planning phase of what we were doing. As we looked to formalize it, we had kind of our first event and had probably about 50 or so people there, but continued to grow the audience and whatnot. And part of what we do too is an email newsletter and Twitter presence that really shares the different news, the tech jobs, the tech events, startup events to the community. And that's continued to grow to now the thousands.
You mentioned that people might not be familiar with Milwaukee, and I have a little bit of familiarity because my brother went to Marquette. But for the audience who might not be aware of Milwaukee as a city, what's kind of happened over the last 20 to 30 years in Milwaukee? Can you just give us like a high level introduction to the city and what it's like?
Yes. So I'm most familiar with the past 10 years since I'm 30. But essentially, Milwaukee's economy has historically been driven by really kind of, I'd say, 2 industries. One is traditional manufacturing. We have a lot of companies that make tangible products, whether it's Briggs & Stratton, which is making motors for lawnmowers and snow blowers, or companies that are in the food and beverage space. So I mentioned the breweries that have come out of Milwaukee. Miller is probably the largest operating brewery that's still someplace. Those other brands have faded, but are now making a comeback. Pabst is obviously wildly popular, but I think only maybe contract brewed by Miller in Milwaukee. So the economy has been very, there's also a financial services aspect to the economy here as well. Northwestern Mutual, which is a Fortune 100 life insurance company, is based here. And they made a big commitment to Milwaukee in the past few years, building a major skyscraper and making an investment in hiring a large tech workforce here in the city. But there's also a healthcare aspect too. GE Healthcare has a large outpost in the Milwaukee area, employing also hundreds of software engineers and whatnot. So the tech economy is here, but I think we've been a little slower to evolve into a tech-driven ecosystem because of our heritage in manufacturing. And so we've really, I think, started, though, in the past few years to get really serious about building a tech-driven economy here in Milwaukee. And as manufacturing, by the way, I should have mentioned Rockwell Automation, which is a Fortune 500 company in the manufacturing space, actually developing a lot of technology for manufacturers is here as well. They're quite large in terms of employing tech workers and also kind of merging technology and manufacturing. So they are here as well.
Given that manufacturing isn't the most tech forward sector, what's the relationship between the big companies in the area and the emerging startup community?
We're definitely still trying to figure that out. As I mentioned, Northwestern Mutual is based in Milwaukee. They have led kind of this effort to try to build the tech and startup ecosystem. That effort's only about 2 years old. They've done that in partnership with Advocate Aurora Healthcare, which is the 10th largest health system, which is joint headquartered in Illinois, in Downers Grove and Milwaukee. Advocate Aurora and Northwestern Mutual have kind of worked to launch a couple investment funds that are investing in local healthcare, for example, healthcare technology funds, as well as early stage tech startups. That's $10 million in funding that has come online from corporate partners specifically looking to invest in Milwaukee startups over the past 2 years. Advocate Aurora, Northwestern Mutual, Foxconn, and Johnson Controls, which is also based in the Milwaukee area, both of them Foxconn's North America headquarters will be in Milwaukee. All four of those companies, on top of that, have recently launched a $100 million venture fund that is collaborative and not focused specifically on Milwaukee, but based in Milwaukee and investing in startups across the country. And part of that fund, I think, will be focused on connecting Milwaukee's ecosystem to kind of what's happening on the coasts and other parts of the country by making those investments all around.
When you were starting Startup Milwaukee, who were you looking to, or what were you looking to help guide the way that you were building that?
I think, Brad Feld's Startup Communities book was definitely something. It was actually, I don't think it came out until 2012, 2013, but the principles in there, I think, have really helped us guide what we do. I think we were uniquely positioned in that all of us were building tech companies or are building tech companies as co-founders. So, we uniquely understood the need of founders. And if anyone's read Startup Communities, they know a startup community really can't grow if you aren't focused on the needs of the tech company founders.
When you look back over the past 10 years or so doing this, what are some of the highlights or landmark moments that come to mind for you as Milwaukee has grown and evolved as a startup ecosystem?
I think some of the highlights have been that we've started to get large companies engaged in the ecosystem. It's been challenging. The local venture scene has not historically been very robust. The large corporations getting involved in the venture ecosystem as well has inspired other folks to get involved in the venture ecosystem, whether as angels or there are a couple funds being raised locally. So being able to get the attention of Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies and getting them involved and engaged in the ecosystem has been really a positive thing that I think a lot of our advocacy work that we've been doing for 8 years now is starting to pay off. We're really excited too. Recently, American Family Insurance, which is another Fortune 500 company, recently committed to opening a pretty substantial tech and innovation office in Milwaukee. We think that it's great that they've realized kind of the available tech talent pool. We have great universities developing a lot of great tech talent. It's historically been exported. So American Family coming in and being willing to hire that talent, help develop that talent has been a big win for us as well. So, having a company from the outside commit to hiring hundreds of people in the city, I think is an exciting validator that the ecosystem is building. They're also they've been a great catalyst in the Madison ecosystem. And I know you talked to Scott Resnick, a good friend of mine who's working hard to build the startup ecosystem in Madison through Starting Block and other initiatives. And so to have them join us here in Milwaukee and realize that the urban environment that Milwaukee offers is different and attractive to a different group of tech employees than might be attracted to work at their Madison campus, and having that additional option and them investing in the city has been great. I think there's just more support that's come on board. It used to not be cool to do tech and startup events when we started 8 years ago. Now it seems there are events every night of the week, different groups popping up, trying to help support entrepreneurs. So it's been great to see that growth. And now allows us to focus on some bigger issues, which are how do we create policy in the state of Wisconsin that enables early stage investment to occur at a greater rate? And how do we think long term and make sure we're building a strong tech workforce and tech talent pipeline? And part of that starts with educating middle school and high school students to get into computer science careers. And that's how I think we ultimately will have a strong tech workforce that's diverse, that gets us towards gender parity in computer science is how do we work on enabling some earlier stage education and also upskilling of existing workers and getting them into tech career paths. That's now what we think about. And we're also working on to continue to aggregate a lot of the great organizations that are supporting entrepreneurs, investing in entrepreneurs, and helping entrepreneurs really grow and scale here in Milwaukee.
What about the companies themselves? Have you guys had any startup company wins over the past 8 to 10 years?
Yes, we've had several. What's exciting is some of those entrepreneurs that have exited companies have gotten involved in startups, whether as investors or some of them have gone and started their own things. One is have an entrepreneur who built the largest online costume retailer by Seasons. He sold that company, experimented with a few different startup ideas, and he's now in his second startup, which is Wannable, which is a subscription e-commerce company. And he's grown that company from a few people probably about 5 years ago to now well over 200 employees in the Milwaukee area. And they are continuing to grow. Another example is Zywave. So Zywave is insurance brokerage software. And that startup has spawned entrepreneurs in the insurance brokerage space. So we've had other companies start up and get built around that insurance brokerage software space. One being Tech Canary, which was just sold to Applied Systems earlier this year. And another one being Dynamis, which was also sold to Applied Systems, which is a large insurance software company earlier this year. And now Applied Systems has opened a Milwaukee office. So, and created a liquidity events for those founders to reinvest in the ecosystems. Those are some tech success stories. We have some tech services entrepreneurs who are building large businesses around, like the Salesforce platform. Penrod and Seven Summits are both large companies that are building consulting practices nationwide, based in Milwaukee, employing a lot of people here in Milwaukee's tech ecosystem, doing great things. And we also have other interesting like e-commerce startups. So Bright Sellers, they just scored Series A led by Revolution. Their subscription e-commerce play, they're selling wine to millennials online and using the data they're gathering to actually develop their own brands of wine that are custom tailored to our millennial taste buds.
So I kind of picked up subscription e-commerce, insurance, but I'm curious, like, from your perspective, what kind of clusters are you seeing emerging in, like, this is where Milwaukee plays right now?
Yeah, there are a few. I also would be remiss to mention health tech as one of those. Milwaukee's, I think, somewhat uniquely positioned in that we actually have quite a few. As I mentioned, GE Healthcare. We've seen a lot of people exit GE Healthcare and end up starting their own startups and being able to raise capital and build strong teams based on the experience they gathered working at GE. So health tech is a space where we have some exciting companies developing here in Milwaukee. Another space would be that kind of B2B software space, as I mentioned, Zywave kind of being a catalyst. They were founded in the 1990s and sold to Vista Equity for well over $100 million, probably around 2010. That catalyzed more, I think, B2B SaaS products. We have interesting products, everything ranging from Arbor Tech, which is they're making an IoT device and software platform that helps arborists track the growth of their trees in orchards. So that's like a very tactical technology that obviously has a very niche market, but is an interesting tech company that is coming out of Milwaukee. Another company in the B2B space, Montage Talent. They were recently merged with a company out of Ohio, but that company will be based in Milwaukee. And they're doing a recruiting automation platform, working with 100 of the Fortune 500 companies, streamlining their interviewing process using video, voice, text. So that's an interesting B2B software company. I think another theme is that subscription e-commerce. We have a lot of agency talent. Milwaukee has an unusually high concentration of digital and creative agencies. So a lot of that talent, I think, helps support the growth of e-commerce companies here in the area. And then lastly, I think there's an opportunity around financial services. As I mentioned, Northwestern Mutual being here, that is clear priority of theirs in their digital transformation is to support startups in the fintech space here in Milwaukee. And they've actually helped seed startups in the fintech space through a unique program they launched during Startup Milwaukee Week a couple of years ago called Reverse Pitch Milwaukee, where they have now invested in two different very napkin ideas basically out of that reverse pitch program. But they pitched essentially a bunch of entrepreneurs different ideas and offered $85,000 in seed funding and space in their building an innovation lab to these entrepreneurs. And out of that have come Social Leads, which is an interesting company applying machine learning to social media data helping insurance brokers kind of mine their social contacts to figure out who might want to buy a Northwestern Mutual life insurance policy from them. And another one, Pythonic AI, which is using machine learning to analyze health data. And that one they just won that a couple months ago. So they're still very much in development. But that's an example of kind of a focus on fintech that's emerging here in the Milwaukee ecosystem.
What does Milwaukee need more? Early stage capital or entrepreneurs right now?
It's a tough question. I think both, frankly. And I think it's a chicken and the egg question that often, I think, may plague other Midwest ecosystems as I've kind of explored them, is I think we need, if you ask the folks with the capital, they would say there aren't enough entrepreneurs. If you ask the entrepreneurs, they would say there is enough capital, leading to an interesting cycle. What I would really like to see, and one of the things we've worked to advocate for, is more attraction-based, really seed stage funding for entrepreneurs here in the region. For example, I really like what St. Louis has done with the Arch Grants program, basically seeding 20 entrepreneurs a year with $50,000 grants, helping them move and start their company in the St. Louis region. And I think something like that might help the Milwaukee ecosystem grow, where it's both attracting entrepreneurs from outside our ecosystem, as well as seeding them and supporting them and really helping them get started. And so I think we need both entrepreneurs and early stage capital. Ultimately, I think entrepreneurs are vitally more important, because if you're a true entrepreneur, you can figure out a way to continue to finance your business regardless if the capital's in our backyard or not.
How connected is the Milwaukee ecosystem to like Chicago? I mean, that's like the mecca of the Midwest for VC.
We're working on being more intentional about that. We've started to see some good connection. There are definitely venture firms in Chicago that have invested in Milwaukee companies. I mentioned Bright Sellers earlier. They have investors from the Chicago area. I think that we'll see more and more deals close that involve Chicago funds. That being said, there's not any real intentional connections being made. We're really lucky that we are a 90-minute train ride from Chicago, though, and that I think will allow entrepreneurs to grow and scale here with the help of being near Chicago faster. And I should mention, too, we've seen startups from Chicago either launch, Milwaukee is a second market. Farmer's Fridge is a good example of that. They're popping up all over the Milwaukee market and have been very active here. We've also seen Chicago companies open second offices here in Milwaukee to take advantage of the tech talent we have here. An example there are a couple different companies that have built development teams in the Milwaukee area and really love the talent and the cost of living difference of living in Milwaukee versus Chicago.
You mentioned that Scott Resnick is a friend of yours up in Madison. So it sounds like you two are close. How close would the typical startup community member in Milwaukee, how would they think about Madison?
It's a great question. We need more connectivity between the cities and I think the entrepreneurs. But I think that it is an hour drive away and it's hard to get over there. I mean, I even find it hard to get over there on a consistent basis. And part of what we're trying to do is get those resources that are for entrepreneurs in Milwaukee that are available in Madison here in Milwaukee and vice versa, help kind of make more connections across ecosystems. What is interesting is there isn't a lot of, I think, investment. There's more investment activity happening between startups in Milwaukee receiving capital from firms in Chicago versus firms in Madison. Although I think there's more capital available in both ecosystems for Milwaukee entrepreneurs than in the Milwaukee ecosystem. I think they're more like an entrepreneur in Milwaukee, if they were to drive to Madison, which takes an hour, or take a train to Chicago, I think they'd be more likely to jump a train to Chicago.
You work in the world of talent. Is there a talent battle between the two ecosystems? And secondarily, maybe even start with this actually, what does the talent ecosystem look like in Milwaukee? And is there any type of competition between Milwaukee and Madison?
I think it's more of a competition between Milwaukee and Chicago than Milwaukee and Madison. I think Milwaukee and Madison are very different lifestyles and offer a technologist a different lifestyle. Madison's very much a college town and is small. I think about 100,000 is the population of Madison. Milwaukee, the metro area, is over 1 million. And the city is over 600,000. So, although we are much smaller than Chicago, obviously in the Chicagoland area, we do offer an urban lifestyle that you couldn't get in Madison. Madison offers a lot of great things that I have a lot of family in Madison. So it's a great place to live and hang out, but it's just a different lifestyle. And I think that's why, for example, American Family Insurance, who employs thousands of people in the Madison area, decided they wanted to offer employees another option if they're looking to relocate to Wisconsin that's more urban. In terms of tech talent, as I mentioned, we have a lot of great universities. We actually have over 24 colleges and universities in the Milwaukee area. A lot of those universities have great computer science programs. A lot of that talent currently is being exported. I think that as we look to kind of highlight what Milwaukee's strength is the availability of young tech talent as well as emerging and growing tech talent. And companies that have relocated here, for example, Bright Sellers, they moved from Boston to Milwaukee when they were just 3 employees big and now have over 50, they've had no trouble growing their team here in Milwaukee. In fact, it's been easy for them to recruit because they are a big fish in a small pond. So as a tech company looking to grow and scale their team quickly, whether it's customer success, software development, digital marketing, talent, they've been able to find it. And they've been able to do that by offering a kind of differentiated experience to employees in the Milwaukee area that might be at a more established company or young people. They've been willing to bet on young people graduating from one of the universities here and helping them start their career here in Milwaukee in tech. So there are great opportunities, I think, for companies that are looking to access a strong tech talent pipeline that is cost effective and growing.
Before we transition into Five Lakes, what are your 3 favorite Wisconsin beers?
It's a very tough question. So at least one of them has to be from Milwaukee, probably, since we have about 15, 20. Actually lost count of how many breweries we have in the city. Right now, I'm very into Hacienda Brewing, and they're actually an offshoot of Door County Brewing up in Door County, Wisconsin, and they opened a tap room in Milwaukee. It seems every time I go in there, they have different IPAs, and all of them are amazing, and they have really weird names. So I don't remember the name of the last one that I had, but Hacienda Brewing, they're great. I also love Central Waters, which is in central Wisconsin. They actually have the largest barrel aging facility in the country, and they do great barrel age, like a great bourbon barrel stout, and they also do some great IPAs. So I'll say I like their bourbon barrel stout as well as their maple bourbon barrel stout is really amazing, but I also love their HHG IPA.
One question for me before we go into a little bit on skills pipeline, Matt. You've dedicated close to 10 years, maybe even a little bit more than 10 years, to the Startup Milwaukee movement and all things ecosystem building. What keeps you volunteering your time in that way? Because I know how much of a time commitment it is to organize these events and pull people together and generally be a cheerleader for an ecosystem.
What really, I think, has kept me here and doing this ecosystem building activity is I'm from here and realized that tech is really, as Mark Andreessen says, and everyone has to repeat, software is eating the world. So for Wisconsin to remain relevant and competitive in the 21st century, we need to ensure we have a strong tech workforce and also have a strong startup ecosystem, because I think that's such a critical ingredient of being able to build a strong tech-driven economy in the region. So being from here, choosing to stay here after school, because I had the opportunity to move to Chicago or move to California, instead decided to start a company and start an ecosystem building movement, which definitely doesn't make money. It's definitely a volunteer effort, as you guys know, I'm sure, has kept me here. Really want to see Wisconsin grow, but also I'm really passionate about the other stuff that's happening all across the state. So we also have the Startup Wisconsin initiative, which does events and programming in 12 cities around the state of Wisconsin. That ranges from Madison, where obviously there's a lot of great stuff going on, and I'm sure the episode with Scott Resnick people should listen to and hear about what's happening there. But also there's great stuff happening up in Green Bay. I think a lot of people know the Packers probably, but Packers and Microsoft recently launched a initiative called Titletown Tech, which has a $25 million venture fund around it. and is helping build startups and technology companies in Green Bay and impact that ecosystem. And there are other great tech entrepreneurs up there as well. So, love Wisconsin as a whole. As I mentioned, my favorite beer is in central Wisconsin. So we have quite a few startup Wisconsin events in that region. But a lot of stuff also happening up in Eau Claire on the western side of the state. Jamf Software, which is one of the bigger Midwestern tech startup exits, I think, in the past year or two, is based in Eau Claire with a dual headquarters in Minneapolis. But the founders of Jamf have been really critical in building the ecosystem there, starting to build it, and opening co-working spaces and providing other infrastructure to tech entrepreneurs there. So a lot of stuff happening. I love Wisconsin, I guess.
So one last thing we want to hit here, this 5 Lakes idea. Can you tell us about what that is and what that looks to be?
We're still trying to figure that out. So myself and my co-founder of 5 Lakes, Kathleen Gallagher, who runs Milwaukee Institute, which is an organization, it's a foundation focused on funding tech and startup ecosystem infrastructure in Milwaukee region, started 5 Lakes. And we have this theory that there's a lot of great activity happening in the Great Lakes tech and startup ecosystem. So everywhere from, Milwaukee to Chicago, Minneapolis, a lot of people forget Minnesota's on a Great Lake, Lake Superior, to what's happening in Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, also up in Toronto. And so we really want to create this platform that helps highlight and connect what's happening all around the Great Lakes. And we started with an event in May called 5 Lakes Forum. Had about 500 leaders from the tech and startup ecosystem in the Great Lakes attend. And, we just want to kind of continue to grow that brand through different events and programming. And right now we're just kind of checking out other ecosystems around the Great Lakes region and looking for people that kind of share a similar passion of growing the tech and startup ecosystem here and creating platforms that connect the dots. I think it's very similar to what you're doing here with Upside.fm. We're looking for partners, looking to talk to people. So people, if they want to learn more about it and help shape the future of it, they can contact me. My Twitter handle's @MattCordio. My email is just matt@skillspipeline.com.
How much are the Wasabi Peas you buy at Kroger?
I think they are about $5, maybe $3.99.
That's pretty expensive for a little snack.
Just a little snack, but the value is there and I think it's worth it.
How do you afford that on a podcaster's budget?
It's tough. I got to dig deep and I got to lean on my other business sometimes.
Well, you know what? I think the listeners could help us out here because there's one thing that they could do that directly correlates with our ability to raise some advertising revenue on this platform.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Oh yeah, I'm going to upside.fm/survey. It is our 2019 listener survey, and it is a key part of our growth strategy here at Upside, so we can keep on telling stories about founders, community builders, and venture capitalists outside of Silicon Valley. And we can get Jay some more Wasabi Peas.
That's right. So, dear listener, if you would do us a solid, if you would do us a kindness, please head over to upside.fm/survey. Answer our 2019 listener survey. It should only take a couple of minutes. Myself and my Wasabi Peas, thank you.
All right, Jay, we just spoke with Matt Cordio of New Milwaukee because at the beginning of this interview, we were talking about old Milwaukee. Sounds like a lot has changed.
Got to start up old Milwaukee into new Milwaukee, and that's exactly what Matt Cordio did.
It feels like as we talk to a lot of these cities, we get a similar picture painted of there wasn't much and now there's a lot. And I feel like that theme, especially in the Rust Belt, which is that kind of, for listeners who might not be familiar, is a crescent-shaped patch of geography around Lake Michigan and Lake Erie. It feels like there were some little informal startup movements happening in the 90s. We hear about it in Columbus. We hear about it in Cincinnati. We hear about it in Cleveland. We hear about it pretty much everywhere except for Chicago. And then they developed and they stayed informal. And now it's kind of become institutionalized where you have these, each city has their large anchor companies investing back in the startup community.
Well, I think to our interview with Greg at 4490 and him talking about when he was looking at different areas in the middle of the country, some of the big institutional partners in Madison were pointing to what he referred to as the inputs of innovation and how they were present in the middle of the country. Things like universities, which Matt told us there were 24 colleges and universities in the Milwaukee area. They have some major industries, starting with the traditional manufacturing industry, but now trying to put more of a stamp in retail, subscription e-commerce, insurance, health tech, B2B, financial services. A lot of those are pretty familiar for the middle of the country. But this term, a lot, this idea that there's a lot happening now, super, super relative, right? In the beginning, the first 5, 10 venture firms feels like a lot when you're used to 1 or 0. But then remember our conversation with Alex at Stage Venture Partners and how LA went from just a handful to now, what did you say, 120?
I think it was like 250.
200 and something? That's a lot. So it's relative, and there's a lot going on relative to what it used to be. But still, some people listening to this and hearing, some of these numbers may still think, there's some growth to be done there, which for sure there are. But some of the examples he gave of Tech Canary and Dynamis and Zywave that have had meaningful exits, I think that's the flywheel that needs to turn in most of these cities across the country is companies that had meaningful exits, spawned off talent, spawned off capital to continue that evolution, because that seems to be the flywheel that needs to turn,
It feels like Milwaukee would be a great place to start a business. I think that they have this friendly rivalry with Madison that allows them to kind of play off each other as cities and as startup hubs. But then you're also kind of in the same predicament as like LA to SF. It's a little different because you're a lot closer to Chicago, but you can live in Milwaukee and take an hour and 15-minute train to downtown Chicago. And then, maybe there's only a handful of venture capital firms in Milwaukee, but then you have the most venture capital firms in the Midwest in Chicago, an hour and 15 minutes away. You could do a day trip every day if you needed to.
I'm interested to see if there's more movement around this Five Lakes Forum or Great Lakes movement that seems to be its own small branding movement for that area. Like, who's going to get all of these ecosystems and stakeholders to play nicely and get behind one thing that isn't owned by one organization? It's a hard thing to do, but there's certainly a lot of upside in being able to pull it off.
Was that a subliminal message?
Yes. The titular line is what it's called in the film industry. When you have the name of the film, the title, when it's actually delivered in the film, it's the titular line, and it's often at the end of the movie, which was what I was trying to do there, Eric.
So we've reached an end, dear listener. This has been a fun one. It's been cool getting up to Milwaukee and learning about the Milwaukee ecosystem. If you have any thoughts on the Milwaukee ecosystem, its future or its past, definitely reach out to us at Upside FM on Twitter, or if you got something longer, hello@upside.fm.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter @UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming, find a way.